My name is Jeremy Sampson. I'm Executive Chairman of Interbrand Sampson. Interbrand Sampson is the hub for the Interbrand Group in Africa, and we're based in Johannesburg. I've just done a presentation on best global brands and talked about branding issues and the value of brands. And from the presentation, you're going to see how brands impact on everything we do in all our walks of life. And people forget just how valuable they are from both an emotional point of view and a financial. So I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you. Interbrand is 40 offices around the world. It's part of Omnicom. It's quoted on the New York Stock Exchange. And we have offices Johannesburg, Cape Town, Lagos, Nairobi. That's the sort of spread we have. Out of Johannesburg and our other offices, we're working around the world. These are leading brands, leading companies around the world. They all believe in brand valuation. They use it all the time, and it's an analytical way of measuring things. In South Africa, these are the brands that we have valued. And when we value brands, we have to use international expertise. So we have teams coming in from London or Zurich office to work with us. But of those brands, we valued ABSA twice and Cell C twice. And a lot of the things are not just to do with the value of the brand. A lot of people think it's the number. When you value a brand, yes, you have a financial number, but it's all the workings. It's the audit of the brand. It's finding out what that brand is doing and how it's performing. To give you a few examples, Pilsner Urquell, bought by SAB, 5 billion rand. And remember, that was the first major brand they bought. Malibu, Cocorico, that's what it was. And Malibu today, a huge brand, sold for over 6 billion. Jaguar and Land Rover. Now, if you don't own brands and you don't have brands, you better buy some brands. So India have bought Land Rover and Jaguar. But the one I love most of all is Absolute Vodka. We talk about nationalization, we talk about government assets. Absolute Vodka was a major asset of the Swedish government. And they decided to sell it off, and they sold it off by public auction. And again, if you can't see the figures at the back, 71.9 billion rand. So don't tell me that brands don't have value and can't be moved around. It's interesting that these tables are revered around the world as being very important. Just a couple of things to explain how they're done. The information is publicly available. In other words, the annual report, investor relations, websites. This is not something where you go to a company and say, give us information. It is only publicly available. And that can create great difficulties because not all the material is available. To give you an example, when we valued South Africa's brands just once, which was about 5 years ago, and we had huge difficulties because we know that Castle, again, is a major brand. But if you look at the SAB and now SAB Miller report, you can't get segmental reporting. So let's look at the top 100 brands. In Business Week, this has appeared the last 11 years. This year it's appeared independently. But Interbrand has been valuing brands going back to 1988. It's work that was developed with the London Business School. And it's the sort of valuation system that has now been challenged by all sorts of different people, especially tax bodies. What are some of the pivotal moments? Well, you know, when you think about it, the last 2.5 years have been very turbulent. I have to say it hasn't changed. It's still the new norm. It's going on. So this is where we talk about brands cannot hide. As we said, they have to be more transparent. The trust is back. Everyone wants to trust something. Brands have always got to stay relevant. They've got to stay young all the time. And this is where customer feedback, everything is a conversation really. And always you have to be totally transparent and engaged. And that is the real world. Then we talk about brand strength, because the thing about the Interbrand methodology is it is financial, and that it goes back 4 or 5 years and projects 4 or 5 years forward, but then it looks at the non-financial. And this is the big difference perhaps from a valuation which your auditor or your accountant will give you. We look at brand strength, and this is where we measure the brand through its commitment. In other words, is it something that's turned on and off, or is it growing all the time? How well is it protected? Its trademark issues. How well is the legal side there? How focused and clear is that brand? Is it responsive to changing fashions, conditions, demographics? After all, in South Africa, what is it, 50% of the population under the age of 21. And then you get onto authenticity, being relevant, understanding your markets. And those of you who are in marketing and branding will know a lot of these things are the sort of things which are your mantra, the consistency, keeping a presence, and the differentiation. So what are the top 10 brands? According to Interbrand, Coca-Cola is the top brand. And again, if you can't see it from the back, that's over 70 billion US, 70 billion. And they were number 1 last year. Coca-Cola, number 2, who were 2 last year. Microsoft. Then you go to Google in 4th, General Electric 5th, McDonald's 6, Intel 7, Nokia 8, Disney 9, and HP 10. This slide might surprise you, especially when you get to Nokia, the ages of the brands. But that means the average age of the top 10 brands is, you can work it out, it's about 75, 76 years. And that's, I think, quite a surprise to some people. When you think that those brands have lived through wars, lived through recessions, lived through dramas, chief executives being fired, whatever, and they're still going strong. So that's quite something that if you're that relevant and that strong, you can keep on doing it. So who are the top 5 brands going up? Apple, Google, BlackBerry, JP Morgan, Allianz. Then we say, well, the ones that have gone down the most. Harley-Davidson. And Harley-Davidson took a huge hit 2 years ago because, of course, the investment bankers couldn't afford their toys. Then from Harley, you get to Toyota, who only dropped a little bit, Nokia, and Nokia is in terrible trouble. It's only dropped a couple of places, but the smartphones are just killing it. Dell going down, and Citibank going down. And then some of the new entrants and new exits. And I must stress that some of this is because of data not being available. It's not because the brand has necessarily had a bad time, or it's because other people have been more transparent. So when you look at new entrants like Sprite, Santander, Barclays Bank, Jack Daniels, Credit Suisse, Corona Beer from Mexico, and brands that fell off the list from the 2009, Wrigley's Chewing Gum, Chanel, Rolex, BP, no surprises there. Duracell was all about transparency because Duracell, you would know, is part of Gillette, which is now part of Procter & Gamble. Prada, one of the few luxury brands that took a real hit. Those luxury brands we'll talk about later have, on the whole, done pretty well. Burger King is interesting because McDonald's has had an incredibly successful 2.5 years through the recessionary times, and Burger King has had a terrible time. When you look at breakdown by country, if you went back about 10 years ago, you'd find the United States was on about 75%. And for the first time, they've dropped under 50%. So the United States is now 49%. But again, as someone said, a huge percentage of their brands have much larger sales overseas. That you can see that after the United States, next major owning company, or country rather, is Germany with 10. And then it slips down. Finland has 1. But just to have one of these major brands has a huge impact on the economy of a country. And then the split by global sector. And again, interesting that electronics is 13, FMCG 13, but financial is still 14, and automotive 11. So those are still the very strong areas of where brands come from. And then we start saying, well, what's happening in the automotive? Well, there is an overdue change, as we say. Financial services, rebuilding and reinventing. Business consulting, 5-year outlook, mind shifting. Reputation is everything to reputation is only one part of the brand. From brand is an expense, and how often do I hear that in South Africa? Brand is a strategic business asset. And the third point, from brand is a special project to brand is a way of working. Telecommunications, what's going on there? And this is where, most telecommunication operations like Telkom are organizations that have been around a long time in countries. They're all fighting that they're not being really sold off as dinosaurs because the mobile world has taken over. The whole digital world, you can see from all these points how many things are going on, but digital is the world. And again, all of us, every single one of us in the room, has to be digitally connected. The food and beverage sector, hunger for innovation. And this is where, especially developing markets, the major producers are realizing that they have to move into those developing markets because that's where the future is, that's where the populations are, and as living standards improve and as disposable income goes up, those are the markets of the future. Consumer packaged goods, customization, consumer connections, catering the consumer's search for value. Luxury, and again, a lot of people have been saying, well, luxury brands, oh, it's a recession, they're going to do badly, aren't they? Well, it might be a recession in the States, but it isn't a recession in China. For the most part, and I stress for the most part, luxury brands still doing very well. People around the world have got money. Retail, the retail experience. And again, a brand like Zara, which I think is just announced is coming to South Africa, but a Spanish fashion brand which has changed things because of its fast turnaround. Media, the threat of the unknown. This is where, again, who in this room reads newspapers? Why buy a newspaper in South Africa when I've read it on my computer the night before off the Wall Street Journal or the FT or around the world, and I know what's going on? Technology, the equalizer of societies. After all, anyone can have technology. But I think, as we know, the biggest empowerer of Africa, if I can put it that way, has been the cell phone. The health aspect, big pharma, big healthcare, where we're talking about diversification, generics. Energy is a key area. This is where we talk about BP and we talk about Shell as a competitor benefiting from BP's problems. Airlines, are they making money? We're told they're not. One of the reasons you won't have seen an airline in the top 100 is because of the lack of transparency. After all, I think Emirates is a huge brand, but how much of that is government-sponsored? Hotels and hospitality, the memorable moments. Are there too many hotels in South Africa? And the fast-developing markets, reading, reacting, and going with the flow. How do we measure brand strength? And I mentioned earlier about the 10 key points. And the 10 key points, as I say, clarity, commitment, protection, responsiveness, authenticity. These are the key things you have to look at. Relevance, differentiation, consistency, presence, and understanding. And this is where we talk about, the internally driven side. And this is where the clarity of wherever you work, do you know what that company stands for? Do you know what its values are? Authenticity is a key area for a lot of brands. Being relevant all the time is an incredibly difficult challenge. The differentiation from the crowd, being consistent. How much do you spend on marketing? Brand valuation is not just about the number. It's a whole process. And certainly when we valued Telkom a couple of years ago, we went through all sorts of scenario planning and strategic workshopping. What Interbrand does is we look at the financial performance, but then you, from the organization, pull out the effect of the brand. And you try, and it's difficult to be totally accurate, I know, but you try and look at the economic profit that the brand plays and the role of the brand. And sometimes you'll say, well, it could be minimum this, maximum that, and you strike a figure. But you start working out the effect of the brand. And then in the brand strength aspect, which I've gone through, the 10 points, you look at the brand earnings, the brand strength, you put in a discount rate or whatever, and that brings you through to the value of the brand. One of the key challenges with brand valuation is how do you value it? And one of the first things is you segment it. So in the case of a bank like ABSA, you might segment it by, say, retail, home loans, private banking, insurance, et cetera, But you can see here the sort of people who accept the valuation methodology, which is important because there are quite a few other methodologies have evolved over the last few years. Some of them are very good, some of them not so good. But the thing about Interbrand is it has been challenged and come through all right. And I'm going to end up with a quote from Dr. Anton Rupert. It takes 10 years to become a good financial expert, 20 years to become a good engineer, but an entire lifetime to become a brand expert. And when such experts finally understand branding techniques at the end of their working lives, they retire and their expertise is lost. Thank you.